You are listening to the Dogmatic podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at dotmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
It's recording now. Patrick, we don't have that much time because, time misunderstandings. We've got just over an hour, then I need to shoot and pick up my kids. Is it okay, before we even begin, can I get you back to do probably what will be part 2? Because I don't think we're going to have enough time to talk about everything. Is that okay?
Anytime. I'm at your service.
God bless you. All right, and I have to apologize for any background noise. My roof has been leaking for the past 6 months, and I finally got some roofers to come along and fix it, but they're not starting till tomorrow. So the scaffolders are putting up the scaffold, and they're using these electric, power. It's quite noisy, so sorry about that. Anyway, Patrick, I was just telling you before I hit the record button, you've got a majestic beard and you look awesome. I'm now growing my own beard. So yeah, I'm going to have the same look as you, but I don't have the hair. You got great hair. See?
Okay. Oh, boy.
You got a good head of hair. But listen, look, it's 2025 and I only got to know about you last year. I think it was the Subtle Cane podcast that introduced me to you. And I looked you up. I looked up your books and my jaw dropped. That's the honest truth. And You've been doing this a long time. Like when I was literally a 5-year-old kid, you were writing about all of this stuff. And I believe, Trilaterals over Washington, Volume 1 and 2, you wrote in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just incredible. But then in 2015, 10 years ago, you wrote your book about technocracy rising and the Trojan horse of global transformation. I mean, you are ahead of the curve. I'm really quite late to the party. Let's just dive in straight away, wherever you want to go. I just want to, normally I have a conversation backwards and forwards. I don't want that today. I just want to hear what you have to say because you're a legend. You've got so much knowledge and expertise in this area. Please talk about what you discovered and what you wrote in your books and what is happening in the world today.
Okay. Well, my studies started with the Trilateral Commission in the 70s, late 70s, with Professor Anthony Sutton. He was a Brit, by the way. I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't know that. No.
Great guy. He came to the United States to accept a position at UCLA as a teaching economics. And then he went to Stanford University after that and studied for a while. And then he got kicked out because he dared to investigate the Trilateral Commission.
He got canceled.
He got canceled. He was one of the early cancel people. But he found out the hard way that the president of Stanford was a member of the Trilateral Commission. He just never thought that would be an issue. He wouldn't have started the study probably, but they didn't want him to pursue his studies at all. And he had this reputation. He is working at the Hoover Institution for War, Peace, and Revolution, I think it is. It's a prestigious think tank at Stanford. And they used to call him affectionately, as his colleagues called him, the Hoover vacuum cleaner, which is a brand of vacuum cleaner in America. But when he got a nose for a project, you couldn't get him off of it. He was just a voracious researcher. Well, in any case, we teamed together to work on the Trilateral Commission. We realized it was a huge story, and I now look back at those days. This was the headwaters of the modern globalization at that point. the Trilateral Commission said openly that they wanted to create a new international economic order. New, what does new mean? Well, we didn't know at the time. I didn't know. We had no idea that this thing called technocracy was a thing, But when I discovered historic technocracy over almost 15 years ago now, I immediately recognized that was what they were talking about. New. Technocracy was the only economic system modeled from scratch in the world. That was my discipline, economics. I studied that. I know there was no other. Nobody ever dared to make a new economic system, but these people did. These were the people at Columbia University, by the way, that did this. The engineers and scientists in 1932, they got together and they thought, well, we can do better. We're scientists. We have progress on our side, sort of stuff, and they cooked up this resource-based economic system.
Yeah,
it's going to be based on energy. This is where all of this stuff today, the resource-based economic system, that's the key, for instance, to sustainable development and Agenda 21 and 2030 agenda what I'm lost my train of thought here. This is what the United Nations has proposed as the resource driven economic system. They want to control all the resources of the world.
Yeah.
Well, when David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski got a hold of this idea in 1973, actually it's a little bit before that, but they started the Trilateral Commission in 1973. That's where it started. Brzezinski at the time wrote a book called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. That book's on the internet, scanned. You can get a scanned copy of it and read it. But basically, it was talking about technocracy. He couldn't use that word technocracy at Columbia University because that word was like off limits. There was a bad experience for Columbia. So they couldn't use that word, but he used another word, technotronic. And at the time, Brzezinski, when he wrote that book, Brzezinski was at Columbia University. I couldn't believe that. I said, "Well, I knew that's where he went to school, and that's where where he was a professor at the time." Well, of course, he knew about historic technocracy. He was there at the seat of it. So Rockefeller got a hold of this idea that this resource-based economic system could help him to get all the resources of the world in his pocket. And you have to understand there's two sides of wealth. One is money. If you have $1 billion in the bank and it's just cash, you say, well, you're a billionaire and you're a rich guy, right? But your money is fleeting. That can be wiped out in a heartbeat because if the bank fails, you're out of business, right?
Yeah.
If you own resources on the other hand, you have oil wells, you've got gold mines, diamond mines, farms, trees. This is wealth, and so the wheels in Rockefeller's head were turning because he knew eventually he'd have to get out of money because he was in process of destroying the monetary system with fiat currencies. So it was logical in his mind, I think, that this was the answer to create this resource-based economic system, basically to trick or defraud the world out of its resources. And this is exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
Since.
Do you think it actually even goes further back? If you look at the seal of the US $1 bill, it says Novus Ordo Seclorum.
Yes.
New Order of the Ages. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a pretty strange thing to put on the back of your dollar bill with a pyramid with an all-seeing eye. Now, Like, I don't know about you, but there's nothing occult and strange about that at all. No.
Exactly.
You're just saying, what the heck? And even technocracy isn't new. I mean, in the 1930s, there was that Technocracy Inc., the website I've just put up, that's still active across America and Canada. And if I'm not mistaken, Elon Musk's grandfather was involved in it and was even arrested because it was outlawed. And they even did a convoy from California to Vancouver. And they were like, with all their cars and trucks and their funny yin-yang red-white symbol. And they talked about technocracy then. And they were like, we're anti-communist and this and that. But, ultimately, look, Patrick, isn't technocracy communism? Isn't it just the merger of these technical bureaucrat scientists, supposedly, who are actually just working for the uber elite rich to manage the planet on their behalf? They will own everything and we will own nothing. And it's just couched in terms of sustainable and efficiency, and everybody will just get their fair share, and we won't damage the rainforest, and we won't produce too much, and we'll do everything just right. It's a managed economy at the end of the day, and isn't that communism?
Well, it's going to be a managed economy. Actually, it's managed people. But oddly enough, in the 30s and 40s, technocracy, the technocrats hated communists. They hated them because they said the communists would not give up the price-based economic system to go along with their energy-based system. And they had a running feud all that time. The communists didn't like the technocrats either, but so it was a mutual hatred, right? And here's the proof of that. Besides, the communists wrote articles about technocracy. We can read it today. But basically, the organization of Technocracy Incorporated, that was started just after Columbia in 1933. They would not allow any communist to join their organization. They had a membership organization. You had to pay dues to get a card, and so if you were a communist, you could not join. Period. And another type of person they would not let in was a politician. They hated politicians with a passion. They thought politicians are what they got, where they were the cause of the problem in the first place for the Great Depression. They hated politicians. You can see this antipathy today between these technocrats and politicians all over the world. The hatred isn't quite there yet, but if they ever have a chance to throw the political class under the bus, they'll do it. That's my opinion. And they wanted to do it back then. And as a matter of fact, when FDR was elected in 1932, and he was seated in 1933 then, the technocrats of that day, they wrote a book. I don't have the book here right in front of me to show you, but they wrote a book, little hardback book, and they called for FDR to declare himself dictator and dismiss Congress and appoint technocrats to run the country from top to bottom.
Wow.
Just like create an org chart and pop our people in here. And somehow you can imagine what went through FDR's head. Now, wait a minute. You just think, here I'm thinking here. Now, if I'm a politician, they hate politicians. And if I declare myself dictator, and I appoint all them to important positions, what's going to happen to me? He'd be the last guy out of turn the lights out, right? So that was how much they hated politicians and how much they hated the Marxists as well.
Okay,
the Marxists.
Sorry, I was going to say the people behind the original movement in the 1930s, the Elon Musk grandfather and whatnot,
Yes.
Were they just a bunch of well-intentioned, idealistic people, young college kids and, hippies of the day who just were sick with the depression and all the bad stuff and genuinely thought of a utopia world? Or were they serving the cabal? Because I've looked
Yes.
into Bolshevikism and crony capitalism. It's the same people behind both.
Yes.
Were people behind the technocrats as well? Or was this genuinely a bunch of people who were well-meaning?
They weren't young people necessarily. Most of the technocrats of that day were a little bit older, maybe in the 40s and onto that. But you didn't see a lot of rabble rousers like the kind that fought the Bolshevik Revolution.
Right.
They had no money at that point. There was other than the fact that Columbia University was the seat of this whole thing. They got kicked out for a number of reasons, but the promoter of technocracy at that point, a guy by the name of Howard Scott, he turned out to be a fraud, an educational fraud. He didn't have the degree he said he had, and they didn't finally figured that out. And Columbia was they're all snooty. They're all PhDs. Don't mess with them. So they basically said, you're a fraud. You're out of here. And the head of Columbia at that time, he was an egomaniac for sure. He figured that he was being played by these people, and he really got ticked off and just kicked him out.
Right.
Somewhat summarily. Yeah, you pack your bags right now and get out of here. And they did. And that's how Technocracy Inc. was started at that point with some of the leftover people from Columbia. But Columbia would have undoubtedly, they would have had money at some point, like maybe from the Rockefellers, maybe from the Carnegies. There's lots of institutional money at that point that could have been made available to them. But they didn't get anything because it was just too early. It was an incubator type of a project, and they just didn't get traction. Nevertheless, the ideas persisted until Rockefeller got a hold of it in 1973.
Yeah.
And off to the races. And at that point, there was just buku money poured into it. It was the scheme of the ages at that point. Let me just differentiate for you why the communists and the technocrats hated each other. The communists always had a central doctrine that people and humans were at the center of the system. We didn't like that. I mean, there's no reason to think they would treat us any better than a dog. But nevertheless, people were at the center of communism. You had to have people. You had to have the working class. If there's no working class, what do you have to work with? Nothing.
Yeah.
Communism was all about the worker, right? Well, they sensed, and they rightly so, they sensed that the technocracy and the technocrats, they would remove man from the equation altogether, and basically micromanage man into oblivion, and there would be no worker class. This was the first tenets of technocracy was everybody will work for the same wage, and this is universal basic income, what we have today, same thing. They're going to give everybody a wage paid in energy certificates, not money. Energy certificates, supply and demand would be out, but you have to buy goods and services according to the energy that went into them to make them in the first place.
Yeah.
And this system would have no place for private property. There would be no inheritance. You had to expend your allowance, if you will. You had to expend it within a certain period of time, or it expired, so you couldn't save money. And the communists got wind of that and said, "Man, this is not going to work for us. You can't do this."
Everything you've said, I can agree with because it's actually on their website. You wouldn't believe it, but they still have the same way. They've got their website, Technocracy Inc. It's a legitimate thing. If you go to articles, go to all articles and scroll down, it says, what would governance look like in a technocracy? And it outlines everything. It outlines everything you talk about, the energy credits and the way you spend and UBI and distribution and education. They are not embarrassed about it, and they talk about it all. Everything you've just said.
Yes, exactly. This has been in our face all these years, and nobody really saw it. I know. And that website and the doctrine, the literature, everything was in place before I started studying. It's not. This information is not brought out by me necessarily. It was there before me. I just saw it. As, my jaw dropped. There's never been another economic system in the world except this. And when Rockefeller said we're going to create a new international economic system, when I found this out, that sealed the deal.
Yeah.
And from that point on, you can see exactly the footprints, the fingerprints of the Trilateral Commission all over this stuff over the years. You saw not only they went in and out of politics in America and in Europe as well, and Japan and Asia as well. But these people are the ones that formed this whole doctrine of sustainable development and Agenda 21 that started in 1992, and then Agenda 2030 and all the other stuff after that related to sustainable development. Sustainable development, if you just look at it from a big picture, it's the same thing as technocracy. Same 100%. Thing. They wanted to control all the resources. And here's one of the kickers. This is where, especially I think that the communists got really upset that the people themselves were considered resources in this system. That was never the case before that. You think about resources of the world. Well, that means the farms and the timber and the oil, and that's the tree frogs and the Amazon, whatever. You think about the environment and all the resources that are there for our maintenance. Well, when they changed the definition, they lumped us into that whole resource management thing. This was from the 30s, but you see this in the United Nations now, where the target is on our back at this point to be managed as resources, just along the same lines as the timber and the field and the cattle and the feedlot.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
100%. Well, I mean, even when I was, a junior doctor and they told me, go to human resources, I thought that's a really strange thing. Resource is something you use up, something that you consume. And it wasn't like, staff welfare or staffing department or whatever. Yes. Human resource. I was like, wow, HR, human resource. And as a junior doctor, I just thought, going into the market, the labor market, having graduated, that's a bloody weird name. And I've realized that whenever my gut instinct has done that, it's always been right. My gut instinct, walking in the supermarket aisle, I'd say to my mum, why do they need to fortify the bread? Why do they need to put stuff in the bread? If it's good enough, it should be good enough. Why do you have to put stuff in? And she just looked at me like, why am I asking a stupid question? And I was right. And it's the same with the HR. I thought, what's this all about? Human resource. Does it make sense? And I think this is what you're talking about. But can I quickly just talk about something? So we've got the background of technocracy, the technocracy movement in the 30s in North America. It kind of died a quiet death, but then was resurrected by your Rockefellers. Now, I've had a really strange journey in the last 4 or 5 years. I was an orthopedic consultant. I got cancelled, and now I'm a goddamn podcaster. I mean, it's hilarious, the journey that I've been through. But not so long ago, something bizarre happened. And this is legitimate. A legitimate member of the Rockefeller family signed up to my Substack and emailed me. And I was like, oh, wow. Are you one of the real Rockefellers? And they're like, yep. I was like, oh, wow. And they said, we love your podcast. I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I'd love to have you on my show. And they went, oh, well, I don't know about that. My name might trigger certain things. I went, let's have a little chat. So we had a little chat. We had a chat over the phone. And I'm like, wow, I'm actually talking to one of the Rockefellers. And they're talking about all the problems in the world and all the horrible evil and how, these bad politicians and we need to get our country back. And then I asked a question. I said, there's many people, including myself, that think a lot of the evil that's happening in the world is because of your family. And they went, well, it's not that simple, Ahmed. Yes, my grandfather might not have been a great guy and blah, blah, blah. And David made some mistakes. But you know what? It's a bit more complicated. There's other people involved, the Kissingers and this and that. It was a fascinating conversation. And then we started talking about the economic model. And they were saying how, like, the problem is, we're consuming too much and we're wasting too much. And the corporations like Pfizer and everything that, they're rapacious and everything we're seeing is because of their greed and corporatism. And I said, yes. And then they said, well, Marx warned us of this. And I said, well, I wouldn't be mentioning Marx, as an example, he's the father of communism and I don't really believe in that. And then they said, well, what is the solution? What is the solution? Because it's not communism and it's not capitalism. I went, well, maybe it is capitalism, but the problem is we don't have capitalism. We've got crony capitalism. And what we need to do is decentralize. And they said, well, yes, it will start off decentralized, but the system eventually results in centralization and monopolization and corruption of politicians and greed and where we are today. And I said, well, I don't know. I think we would put in safeguards. She goes, well, there you go. You've got regulation coming into it and it's going to be the same problem as we have today. So what is the solution? I went, to be honest, I don't really know. I haven't got to that point yet. And they went, well, see, that's the problem. We need to find a solution. Anyway, I should get back on the phone with this person and ask them, what do they think is the solution? Is it technocracy? Because it sounds like that's the avenue they would be going down. What do you think?
Well, exactly. Probably they would understand sustainable development. If you talk about that, like the sustainable development goals, there's 17 of them right now. And they understand the world in terms of sustainability. But that's technocracy. It's flat out the same thing as technocracy from the 1930s. They had to rebrand it, by the way. The marketing terms are important. Words are important. Certain things trigger people unnecessarily in their mind. So why not change the terms? In Europe, there was no problem with the word technocracy, technocrats in particular. They've used that term for all these years. But in America, that was never the plan. They changed the definition of what they were going to do to smart growth. It wasn't technocracy, it was smart growth. And smart growth became the banner under which all this stuff has been implemented in America. Well, you guys may not know what smart growth is, but we know because it's the same thing, right? It's micromanagement of everything in the economic space, including people. So
this is where I want to come to. This is where I want to come to. Give me an elevator pitch, paragraph definition of what is technocracy. For all those people, I've read the websites, I've read your book. A lot of people would be like, okay, I think I know what you're talking about. In a nutshell, what is technocracy?
Number one, it's a social engineering system. This is kind of antithetic, I suppose, to what I'm going to talk about. But they said, number one, that they're an economic system. They wanted to supply all the goods and services to all the people all the time. But they led in their definition in 1937, in particular, they said Technocracy is the science of social engineering. And then they went on after that to say and we're going to give all the goods and services to people and the technate. Well, the idea of social engineering, if you think about it for a minute, the problem they had, these are the top engineers at Columbia University, for instance, that they could build factories, they could build systems of things, but the problem is that the factories would run. You have to have people to do something. People would not run the same way that factories run. You know, they break up, they break down, they get mad, they get sick, they don't want to work, whatever. It's like herding cats, right? So they got this idea from experiments going on in that day that they can condition people with this so-called science of social engineering. They can condition people to do what they wanted them to do. Everything after that then was just total manipulation of the human population. Because look at it this way: you don't have to worry about social engineering to, for instance, cattle or trees or factories. There's no social engineering there, right? This only applies to people. It's only ones that we need to be engineered. So, to do the same thing that they want. So here you have, for instance, in China now, they have a social credit scoring system that keeps everybody in a channel. If they go here this way or that way, they're going to get dinged and they're going to get penalties and fines or whatever. The people in China don't like it at all, but this is the epitome of social engineering, the science of social engineering. This is why we see all the propaganda today. I'm convinced of it. All of the things that are designed to manipulate our mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is important.
So in a nutshell, can I have a go at defining it? It's basically a new energy-based economic system that's going to be run by scientists and engineers and bureaucrats who essentially think they know best. They know better than the average pleb who's ignorant and just a mouth eater and a useless eater and a consumer. They are enlightened. They care about the planet. And they are going to basically allocate energy. They know what energy is in the ground, and they're going to take it out, and they're going to subtract what's needed to run the system, and then they'll know what's left over, and then they're going to divvy up that energy to everyone, and everyone will use that energy credit to buy stuff, but the stuff will always be there in a certain amount. They won't make 100 fridges when there's only 10 people there. So there won't be any waste in the system, because profit eventually, is waste. Everything is accounted for. Everything will be super efficient. Trees will be chopped down, but not one tree too many, just the right amount. And with this perfect system, everyone will be fed, clothed, and the environment will be taken care of. And you know what? The technocrats, the bureaucrats, the managers, they will run this system. And you don't want pesky politicians, because they just want the vote, and they'll promise things and lie, and they're corruptible. These enlightened souls will run the most beautiful, perfect machine system. But the problem is you've got pesky humans who have free will. So now you have to condition them and engineer them to think a certain way. And with the advances in behavioral science and knowledge of psychological manipulation, there's a constant mind war at play through mainstream media, the airwaves, the TV, where they're constantly programming us to think and behave in a certain way, which is, conducive to their system. They want us operating along those lines. They want us consenting to their diktats by doing what they want us to. And we think we have free will when we don't. We're being hacked. And they even say this, that we're hackable creatures. And during COVID, for example, the mind war, 5G warfare was an overdrive. And we saw in the UK, the nudge units, behavioral nudge units, is open. It's not a conspiracy, where they were nudging the
Yes.
population to take the vaccine, to, to be conditioned to accept lockdowns and social distancing. So the PSYOP, behavioral manipulation, is very integral to the technocracy, but they've rebranded it and made it palatable to the human population so that the human population will demand the system, because they say, look, we're killing the planet and we need to save the planet. That's a climate change agenda and narrative. And then they bring in sustainable development, because isn't that saving the planet? And that's then where you get stakeholders, capitalism, and communitarianism. It's all about doing what's best for the community, and it's for the greater good. It's not for you, it's for the community. But ultimately, what they want is a one world government, total resource allocation, and running the system. Is that okay?
That's very good. You're hitting on all cylinders here. And you remember Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum said a few years ago that by 2030, you'll own nothing. You'll own nothing. Now, what is he thinking? How can he say that?
How can he say that?
Somebody has to own all the stuff. That's obvious. If it exists in time and space, somebody has to own it. But it's not going to be you. That's the point. You or me. We're not going to. We're going to be existing on pay-per-view at that point. If you want to rent something, you can have it, but you can turn it back to the owner at that point. Maybe you want a car, well, you can rent it, and that's in it. You turn it back. This is not the way that people want to live. I can guarantee that for sure. But there's no way that he can be thinking of anything else other than technocracy at that point, because there's no other concept in the world that proposes no private property for anybody. And that's part and parcel of sustainable development. The end of it, when you take it to its logical end, everybody will end up as a level of playing field. Everybody will end up exactly the same with a exact universal basic income or whatever they're going to give us, and will be managed like the cattle in the feedlot. Literally, I use that example. I used to be a rancher in my young days, and I understand feedlots. The cattle get moved from this pen, that pen. They get fed a certain ration. They get shots, medical antibiotics or whatever. They don't know what's going on. They don't have any free will either. But this is the picture that I have in my mind. This is how they're going to eventually manipulate us, like the cattle in a feedlot.
Do you think part of what's happening is that people like Elon Musk must have sat down with his mum and dad, who'd been heavily influenced by their dad, the grandfather, and this stuff has all been passed down, and they think that they're smarter, more intelligent, more wealthy, and they know how to do things better than us. We're just busy consuming drugs, alcohol, TV, porn, whatever it is. We're just dumb cattle at the end of the day, dumb sheep. They know what's best. And with the advances in AI in particular, they can say, well, look, see, we've got rid of all these stupid politicians who've done. And I worry about the limited hangout where they'll turn around and say to us one day, oh, see, look, JFK was assassinated. Oh, look, Trump and Biden were involved in the mRNA jabs. These heroes of ours, the messiahs, we can't trust them. They're all liars. And so at one day they'll bring down the politicians. They'll say, you can't trust these goddamn politicians. They're all a bunch of liars. And everybody will be so gutted and disappointed that their messiah let them down, took us to war, etc. That we'll say, oh yeah, well, why not embrace AI? AI is smart. AI is impartial. AI is not messy, sticky human being. So now the technocrats get to rule over us via AI, which at the end of the day will be programmed by the technocrats. Do you think that's what we're seeing now because of the advances of technology and the way they can monitor us and manipulate us?
Yes.
The constant surveillance. They've got the mechanism in place now to enact what they want.
Exactly. So AI is going to be the pinnacle of technocratic development at this point. That's going to be the tool they use to convert the whole world. what happened in 2020, by the way, that was the first volley that the technocrats took against humanity. And I think that at the time when I saw what was happening early on, I said, this is a coup d'etat by the technocrats to conquer the human race with COVID and then the shots after that. And I think this is being borne out now, where the technocrats have basically taken over our government, not yours necessarily, but in our instance right here, we have the technocrats, the arch technocrats of the day. They're swarming all over our administration right now. They're swarming. These people have never been on the surface of anything for all these years, since 1973. They've never surfaced. They always worked under the cover to build their infrastructure, to get things, eventually to get things done. They served liberal presidents, left-wing presidents, conservative presidents, didn't matter. They always stayed under the surface. Now, however, they've chosen to elevate themselves in the public eye, and they're surfacing. We see people like Elon Musk now wantingly strip mining our government. And we have a lot of, we all know we have a lot of waste, a lot of corruption, all that kind of stuff. But Elon Musk is making the case, see, your government, your whole system is so screwed up. You can't trust these people. They're going to cheat. They're going to steal. They're going to do all this bad stuff. You know, they're corrupt. We need to put AI in to straighten everything out. And that's exactly what the end goal is at this point, I think. Of these technocrats, they're going to put the claws of the claws, that is the talons, right, of this AI into our society to where we can't get loose. That's going to be the end of AI. Well, the end purpose of AI is something you can't get loose from. Once it has you, you can't get loose. There's no way out. There's no escape hatch at that point. So if they replace all of these departments and workers and whoever gets fired along the way or put in jail or whatever, they're going to have AI is going to make their job up, you know. So all of a sudden we'll have dispassionate, no mercy, artificial intelligence, which is not. There's no, you know. That's an oxymoron in my mind. I don't think it's not really intelligent, but it mimics it, right?
Yeah.
So people are going to be fooled into thinking, well, that's the answer now. AI will save us.
Yeah.
But the problem is now, you know, the technocrats have another motive here, not the motive of make America great again, for sure, but I think what we're going to see is the eventual destruction of our political system, where the politicians might be in there, they might be in place in name only.
Yes.
But they're not going to have any say on anything substantive.
Well, it's already happening. And you know what? I've just had this eerie thought in my head. So in the last few years, I've been able to amass a very large following on X of over 200,000. On Instagram, over 20,000. On Substack now, you know, within 18 months, I've got about 13,000 on my newsletter. Wow. And I kind of wonder, why am I being allowed to speak up? Why have they not shut me down? And I've just thought about this. I'm very critical of governments and politicians. Mm-hmm. Maybe they love the fact that I'm exposing governments, because one day they're going to say, yep, governments are wrong. People like Doc Malik are right. Governments are terrible. Politicians are corrupt. They're all evil. And you know what? We need a new system. And you know what? Let's bring in AI. Incorruptible, impartial, scientific, the future. Maybe I'm serving inadvertently their agenda. Just that thought just came into my head.
Yeah, I can have that thought too, a little bit. But, you know, in the big scheme of things, we're still like little piss ants, you know. We're little miny. We're not a threat to them.
We are
really.
piss ants. Yeah, we
They
absolutely
could snuff us out. Like, for instance, 5 years ago, my traffic to my website was just huge. There was days when we'd have over 50,000 people visiting my website. Google decided they got wind of what I was doing apparently, and they buried Technocracy.news so far in the feed. When you search for the word Technocracy, you won't find Technocracy News until you get like page 12.
Wow.
Nobody goes there. You know, nobody. You get the first page. Basically, you pick off that page. So our search traffic went down by 95%.
Wow. So just mention your website again to everybody so they can check you out.
Technocracy.news. Just look. Do if you type it in that way, and in your browser, of course, just technocracy.news, it'll come up.
Yeah.
But don't search for it on Google. However, if you look at any other search engine, I use one called Yandex. It's not Yandex.com. You know who it is. They're a Russian organization, but nevertheless, they don't filter. It's just an unfiltered view of the web.
Yeah.
Technocracy.news will turn, if you put the word Technocracy word in and Yandex, it'll come up on the first page, if even not the first listing. So that's a standard that you should see on Google, but no, Google has buried us 6 feet under.
Wow. Listen, can I ask you something? I want to talk about basically technocracy as a tool. Do you think, I think there's a ruling cabal of people, maybe 8,000, some very rich, powerful families who have been instrumental behind setting up the fiat monetary system that we see today, especially in the US, the third iteration of the private central bank. Around the world, the global economic system, the hegemony, the people that were behind the Bolshevik revolution, behind the rise of Nazism. Do you think they've just jumped on this? They've said, right, we tried communism. It's good, but not maybe that good. People have got a pesky habit of revolting and fighting back. It's not that efficient. We've tried capitalism. It's good, but do you know what? We're kind of fed up with the age of consumerism now. We've got all the wealth and resource. We need to consolidate it. We don't really need them to consume anymore. We just need to control them. Do you think these same people have now decided, hey, technocracy sounds like a great idea? And isn't that the same as communitarianism? It's just a way of bringing in technocracy. It's been rebranded as stakeholder capitalism and communitarianism, all these subversive things. They never come out to your face. It's never a full frontal assault. And they're not like, it's not an enemy that fights fair. You're my enemy. I'm going to fight you. I'm ready for you. They come to you like wolves in sheep's clothing, pretending they're doing things for your benefit, that they care about the planet, that they don't want to waste things. It's not about profit or money. When actually it's all about control and consolidation of their power. Do you think that's what's going on? That's who's behind this?
I think the economic power is more important than the political power, because basically technocracy originally, they didn't want any political power at all. They wanted to run everything directly. Politicians and discussion is useful. It's useless to a technocrat. Well, think of Anthony Fauci standing up on national TV here. I'm sure you heard him, right?
Yeah.
Saying basically, you can take shots at me, but you can't take shots at science, because science is, I represent science here. Science is right. Of course, we know that that was a bull, right?
Yeah.
But when somebody stands up and says, I have the absolute truth here, you need to obey it, this is different proposition. If AI says you're going to do a certain thing, or you need to do something, that's the AI has figured out, sifted all the research in the world to bear on you that you need to do this certain thing. You're going to do it at that point. So
no, but I'm asking who's behind it? Who's actually now in the driving seat? Is it the ruling predator class?
Yes, it is. You look at the Rockefeller family, for instance. They've always been about resources. They understand, like the oil, that's how they got started. The oil in the ground was the big resource that made them rich. And today, the people, the can't get the word out, but the big way, oligarchs, they're bent on accumulating all of the resources of the world into their pockets. The resources in their pockets, forget the political systems for a minute. They want all the resources in their pocket, under their control, so that they can meter it out to us, the selfish humans, that to consume less on the planet. But they're so selfish at this point. They want everything under their own control. That's why I say this is an economic system, not a political system.
No, I get that.
When they stand up and say, well, we're going to make sure society's going to be run by AI, and it's going to be cut and dried. Everybody's going to have to do what AI says, period, or you'll be cut off from the system. Sounds a little like the book of Revelation. You know what? When everybody can't buy and sell because somebody put the mark on them, right? Well, this is kind of the concept here. This really is a beast system where you have no autonomy at all. In the end, the science is going to tell you what you have to do, not you. You're not going to make any decisions for yourself. Science is going to make the decisions for you.
And now you can see why they want digital ID and everything. So
yes.
But in a recap, it's just a ruling elite being a bunch of selfish, greedy, arrogant, psychopathic people who just want everything. I always joke that they will want their homes, which will have estates the size of Belgium, and they'll be eating steak and all the fine food, and they'll be traveling in their private planes or whatever hovercrafts to ski holidays and whatnot. And most of humanity would be stuck in these digital ghetto cities eating gloop, from dispensers. But and no one will care because we're getting paid, we're getting universal basic income, whatever, it's great. But I think that's the kind of world that I envision. Is that what you see as well?
Hang on a second. Okay, I got you back. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Is that the kind of world end view that you can see happening with this technocracy? Yes,
this is where it's going. I've called it in the past neo-feudalism.
Yes.
In a sense, where a few people own all the land, and if you want to live, you find somebody who will tolerate you and let you sharecrop or something, squat basically on their land. And if they don't like you, you're gone. And that's they call that the Dark Ages, didn't they?
Yeah, they do.
Except now it's all automated, and AI is going to do the job for them eventually.
They don't even need to have a slave master. One of the things that I was speaking to one of the directors of Jones Plantation. Have you ever seen the movie Jones Plantation?
I don't think so.
It's a fantastic movie. It's made by one of you Americans. And anyway, he was explaining to me that in the plantation days, the slave master wasn't even the boss. The slave master was beholden to the bankers and the people, and had to keep everyone in check, and it was stressful for them. And and I see AI being the slave master working for the psychopaths and the philanthropists. Yeah, and the best thing is, it's not a human. It's just it's a digital slave master who will keep everybody in check, will be extremely efficient, will, be non-emotive. It'll just be the machine. But the problem is this 5G warfare that we've got. We've been convinced. I did a speech and I wrote a Substack article about this, where the inversions, the age of inversions. But I said we're being attacked, multi-pronged attack, everywhere you look. But the biggest attack is on the war in our minds, and we're being convinced that we're doing good when actually we're doing great evil, and we're doing this evil on behalf of the bad ones. We're the ones mainly doing the evil. We're building the prisons, the mind prisons, the digital prisons. We're designing it, we're manufacturing it, and then we're marching into it and thanking our slave masters as we do so. And I'll give you an example. Being a doctor, I can give you this example. Patients are struggling to see doctors here in the UK. I've been told by so many people recently, they can't get an appointment to see the doctor. Nothing. They ring up and they get told, log on to an app and submit your information in the app. And if you want to show something, send pictures through the app. And then someone will come back to you and phone. And basically, if they're lucky, they get a GP ring them back and say, right, we've had a look at your message and your picture. We're prescribing you this drug. And the phone call is like a minute. There's no opportunity to ask questions. There's nothing. And the patients are really frustrated. They don't get any human contact. Yeah. It's all in an app. It's all digital. Right now, they're still getting to speak to a GP, but it's very curt. Tomorrow, there won't be a GP. Tomorrow, it'll just be an AI person, or doctor. You won't even know.
That's right.
Telling you this is the plan. Yes. But the problem is the doctors are going along with this. I met a doctor and he was complaining about annoying patients who all they do is whinge and whine. And he's happy to use this app. He's happy to have telephone appointments only. Yes. He's happy to hide in his little clinic cubicle and not deal with patients, not knowing that what he's doing is digging his own professional grave, as are all doctors, as are all other professions. I just feel like humanity is actually enabling this shit show, and I don't know what to do about it. Am I right?
You're right. You're right. In China, you probably have seen this. China has instituted an AI hospital.
No.
Where there's no hospital. There's no doctors. There's no nurses. Just AI hospital. And they're intending to treat initially 5,000 people a month, I think it is. And this is all being diagnosed. Everything is going to be diagnosed and issued. The prescriptions were going to be issued by AI. And they want to expand this now to like 10,000. I mean, in the short term. And I don't know how the people are going to react to it. But exactly what you say, exactly that. There's no opportunity for anybody to move left or right in the system. It'll be their way or the highway.
Okay, right. Listen, we're coming up to an hour. I think this is a good place to stop because I need to get ready to pick up the kids. But what I wanted to talk to you next was about things like the smart cities, about public-private partnerships, about the scientific dictatorship, about sustainable development, more what that actually looks like, about things like collaborative governance, all these tools that they're creating, reflexive law, cryptocurrencies, all this kind of stuff. I even want to talk about the role of China, the rise of China, because I think that's all part of it. Do you think that's a good thing to talk about in part two? And anything else that you want to add to that?
Absolutely. No, that's perfect. Perfect. We've laid a good foundation here, and I think that's a good place to go. Absolutely.
Hi, me again. You're listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or on his Substack, or simply buy him a coffee with one of the donation links which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
So recap, we talked about technocracy and its evolution and its failed start, and then it was resurrected by the Rockefellers and the Kissingers and the God knows who else. and who knows who they serve. But they thought, hey, this is great. Communism didn't work out so well. Capitalism is a bit crony. It's a bit outdated. Let's get a new control mechanism to enslave humanity. This might be the trick. So where do you think China came in to play? Because something funny happened in the 70s and 80s, didn't they? Kissinger went over and suddenly China became our friend. But China is still a communist-run country. It's one party, but suddenly their economy booms. All the jobs go there. Where does that fit in with technocracy?
What happened in the 1970s with Kissinger first going to Russia, or China rather, it was an illegal trip for him. It was not authorized at all by Congress or anybody else. Then that was followed up by Brzezinski, in particular, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who invited Chairman Deng to come to America to negotiate their introduction into this world economic system again. What happened with all that whining and dining of Chairman Deng, Brzezinski was all smiles to teach him about technocracy, not capitalism, not free market economics. They taught them about technocracy. We see this going forward from 76 to the year 2000, when Time magazine wrote an article called The Revenge of the Nerds. Stupid title, right? But Time magazine was one of those press companies that was invited to join the Trilateral Commission in the first place. The chairman or the editor-in-chief of Time magazine, his name was Hedley Donovan, I think. In any case, he was a member of the Trilateral Commission. That was one of the organizations that pandered to David Rockefeller. He didn't own the company, but nevertheless, they pandered to him. And so whenever they released anything, even to this day, about the Trilateral Commission, I pay attention to whatever they say. They were like the unofficial mouthpiece for the propaganda that came out of the Trilateral Commission. So in 1999, maybe at the end of the year, right there at the turn of this millennium, they wrote an article, they carried an article called The Revenge of the Nerds, and it was all about China. I don't have that article at my fingertips right now, but I'm going to just paraphrase for you. Basically, they said, and they talked about the history of technocracy from the 1930s. They talked about the interaction that Zbigniew Brzezinski had with Chairman Deng in 1976. And then they concluded, because all the engineers had been moved into the top positions in the administration of China, they said China is now a technocracy, period, as a subject. That title, however, was kind of misleading in a sense, but the revenge of the nerds, what does that mean? Well, maybe that was the revenge that Zbigniew Brzezinski had on all the rest of us, as China adopted the engineering processes or practices of technocracy. So China has morphed a bit like away from being just identified as a communist dictatorship, because it really isn't at this point. But as a technocracy, they're showing every signs of technocracy, including their social engineering skills that they've refined over the decades. And we see them at this point, they're exporting their technocratic control system to any country in the world who will accept it. Asia, South America, South Africa, any other country, even including America at this point, is being fed to us probably from China to some extent. At least we're in a race with them to establish our own form of social credit scoring system. So all that to say, China has been very clever to keep their trappings of communist dictatorship in full display. Every time you see any picture of Chairman Xi or any of them, there is always in front of the Politburo. And, the red star, the red everything. People think, oh, it's red China. You know, that's all there is to it. But in my opinion, at this point, I think the literature at this point bears this out. China has ceased to be a communist dictatorship. Now it's a technocracy. That's just as bad, by the way, as a communist dictatorship. Don't think there's any relief here. Not at all.
Well, I agree with you. I think this whole name thing about communism is just a bit nonsensical because China's full of billionaires. And a proper communist country, you wouldn't have billionaires. And they have industrialists and they have all these very rich elite class, predator class. They've got their own class of people at the top. And then people talk about, oh, it's a modern communism with a touch of capitalism and it's a capitalist economy, but a communist governing structure. And I think you're right. I mean, if you pull it all back, it's nonsense. It's kind of morphed into this technocratic state. But the reality is they're not this organic, big, baddie opposition. They were groomed by the West, by the Kissinger, by the Rockefellers.
Yes.
You know, they were facilitated to rise and become this economic force because I feel that the people behind everything have no allegiance to any country. They are globalists. They are globalists, and they will bring certain countries up, then they will bring them down, then they'll bring other countries up, then they'll bring them down. And you can look at Venice, you can look at the Dutch Empire, you can look at the British Empire, you can then look at American Empire. You know, they have no allegiance to any country, right? They don't care. So while nominally they might be American at this point, you know, they're not American. They're not patriots. They don't believe in the Constitution. They don't want to uphold it or whatever. I mean, am I right in that?
You are. And let me tell you a story just to reinforce that. When Kissinger and Brzezinski were dancing with Chairman Deng, at that point, it was illegal for any company from America to do business with China because they were our enemy at that point on the books. So it was patently illegal for any American company to go there to give aid and comfort, if you will, to the enemy, right? Well, while Deng was meeting with Brzezinski in 1976, an American company, a private American company, the largest private company in the world, called Bechtel Corporation. That's a construction company. They do like everything from nuclear plants to water projects, big stuff. At that point in time, we found out later that Bechtel had already been to China and it was in China at that point, building out infrastructure projects for China for building bridges, dams, railroads, you name it. At that time, Bechtel had completed 18 projects, major projects in China, illegally. They flaunted the law. Just basically, just forget us. We'll do whatever we want to do. And so Chairman Deng got a lesson on how we're going to help you, do this technocracy thing. We're going to build your infrastructure even as you speak here with us right now. And it's already taken place. You got the roads, you got the railroads, you got airports, the putting in power stations and coal plants and all that kind of stuff for China to morph into a modern country. At that point, you have to remember that China looked a lot like North Korea looks like today. They had nothing. They were flat on their back looking up. That's all they had. Bechtel swooped in. Then other companies, when the door opened for other companies come in, they were all associated with the Trilateral Commission. Companies like Caterpillar Tractor, for instance, John Deere tractors, like for agriculture stuff. All the corporations in the West who had members of the Trilateral Commission sitting on their board of directors. It was stunning. We did a study on this. Sutton and I were absolutely blown away that all of the companies initially, they were all associated with the Trilateral Commission. Every one of them. It's amazing.
Wow. And while we're talking about the Trilateral Commission, we should just touch upon that. That's an organization with three big main arms. One is the States, one is Europe, and one is Japan. And it was basically about carving up the world and under the control and influence of these three main centers. The Japanese sphere would look after Korea and China and the Far East, and Europe, obviously, is Europe and the Near East, and then America, North and South America. And again, Rockefeller kind of organization, and kind of similar to the WEF, all these things like Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group, WEF, they're all basically ways of putting their men into positions of power and influencing governments and corporations.
Yes.
Is that correct?
It is. And you nailed you hit the nail on the head when you said these people have no allegiance to any one company or country, rather. That's been seen so many times over in history. Anthony Sutton, wrote extensively about the transfer of technology from the West to the East. And his works are legendary at this point, documenting how Wall Street, especially, was the engine of finance for all of these operations, even going back as far as the Bolshevik Revolution, for instance.
Yeah, 100%. I know about that. I mean, even as a younger person, I remember reading, because I loved history. I loved war history. When I thought war was romanticized and amazing, and we were the good guys. I mean, now I've changed my whole view on war, and I'm a pacifist. I think every war is a banker war. I don't watch the Second World War movies anymore. But I was actually shocked when I realized that American Sherman tanks were being sent over to the Communist Party. I never really understood that. I didn't understand why, we were supporting the Russians. I thought, well, if we don't like the Germans and we don't like the Russians, let them fight it out. Let them kill each other. Who cares? We'll mop up afterwards. I never understood why we'd be sending so much to support the Bolsheviks. And then I looked at who the Bolsheviks were, and that was an eye-opener. 80% of them, like who they were. And then I looked at who gave the money to them, and it was like, wow. Well, ain't this interesting? This isn't an organic thing, homegrown. No, they're basically, there was a little bit of, discontent amongst the populace against the Tsar. I mean, you tell me one country that doesn't have a discontent. You telling me that Americans weren't upset with Biden? Every country has a group of people who are not happy with the ruling class. But you got a bunch of international people to come over and exploit that, and like any just modern day color revolution, overthrow the legitimate ruling body and implant their own people, it's just fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Anyway, yes. So moving on, Trilateral Commission, blah 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 blah. Let's move on a bit. So China has been brought up, and I think part of it was it served a lot of things, from outsourcing the jobs, offshore, basically deindustrializing the West. Yes. Lifting up the economy of China, which then bought the debt from America to fund the military-industrial complex. And then these two are now caught in a cycle. China needs the American debt to fuel its economy, which is to manufacture, and it needs the consumers in the States. The Americans need the manufacturers to provide for their consumerist economy. And now you've got this weird marriage where China's buying the debt, Americans selling the debt, and they kind of need each other. They can't live without each other. They're locked. They're just locked in this strange tango dance. But also, I feel like the technocrats use China as a board to say, look, well, there's one extreme. And this is look how far they're going ahead and look how successful they are. Everyone else has to kind of emulate them and copy them. And you heard comments like Justin Trudeau saying how he admires what China's doing. And I've heard politicians across the West talk about that and say, oh, look, what they're doing is incredible. You know, we're going to have to emulate some of what they're doing. So what you do is you basically, by lifting China, you've shifted the goalposts and everyone else has to now catch up and kind of mirror them in some respects. Do you agree?
I do. Yeah, exactly. You're right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So then let's move on. Let's move on to, you know, what is the smart city? You know, because you were talking about this 10 years ago and people are now talking about, I only heard about it a couple of years ago. To me, you know, I've got a rough idea what it means. Can you explain to me and the listeners what exactly is a smart city?
The idea at first was to hook up all of the devices to what was called the Internet of Things. That consisted of sensors, maybe elevator sensors in buildings, street sensors sensing traffic lights, microphones that might be embedded around the city. Any conceivable place where a device could be planted. There you go. Exactly. It could be planted.
The TV, the laptop, the phone, everywhere.
Yes. This has morphed since that time. It's just incredible now. And the estimates today are like, there's like several million devices are being connected every single day at this point. It's just incredible. So the idea of taking all of these sensors together makes a smart city where you can measure and monitor the flow of traffic, the traffic of people individually, using cell phones now. This is a big thing for sure. But when you take all these sensors together, all of a sudden you have a picture of what's going on in that city. Period. It's total surveillance at that point. And that we see this is scary, actually. We don't live in a smart neighborhood right now, but part of Phoenix is actually a smart city. And it's a scary thing.
Why are they doing this? Why are they doing this?
For control. This was all about the control of the masses. Period. When 5G, especially when 5G was introduced, and by the way, that was really pushed by President Trump in his first administration, big time. When 5G came into existence, it was the first mechanism that could connect the Internet of Things together with low power transmitters. And this has since just exploded all over the world, and especially in America, and I'm sure in your country as well, and Europe, all over the place. When 5G appeared, the whole Internet of Things and this concept of a smart city just exploded to the max. Today, we're almost trapped at this point. There's another aspect to this. When you add AI into the mix, now, there's a new concept today called the digital twins. A digital twin is something you can create in silica, on your screen, in other words, where you can take, say, a building where you have all the physical dimensions of the building, but you have the power laid into it, the plumbing, the people, where office desks are, all the communication systems, etc. You can take now a program that can create a digital twin of that building using real-time information to fund the operation of the building over here in Silica, right? So the idea is that the engineers can look at that digital twin and they can make changes for that from that on that twin. For instance, maybe they want to see what would happen if we turn the temperature, the thermostat up on floor 15 or whatever. What would that do to the whole building? Well, if they like the results, they can just commit the changes back to the original part, the physical twin, right?
Yep.
This concept now is being used all over the world for things like digital twins for your body, digital twins for buildings, digital twins for entire cities, and even now there's a project going on to actually do a digital twin of entire region of the country.
Wow.
Incredible when you think, but this requires AI running on supercomputers, believe me, to make the model work.
Well, I'm putting up a screen of Melbourne. This is I don't know if I can make it work. Probably not. The computer's too slow. It takes a lot of memory to do that. But basically what I was putting up was the Melbourne Digital Twin City. Another one is Singapore. And I recently had Tim from Beat the Reset on my podcast talking about digital twin cities. And it's exactly what you've just said. And I was actually going to ask you, have you heard of digital twin cities? And then you just went into it. And you absolutely everything you've said is what they do. And I've seen the models. And what they do is there is a replica, real-time replica of the physical city with all its inhabitants, all its people, all its traffic, everything. And it's all the sensors in the street lights, in the cars, in the phones, everything.
And the people.
The people, all the devices. It's crazy. You can go back in time and see where everything was and when, and you can see the plumbing and the piping and the tubing and the electrical stuff. But it also has predictive programming too. They can map out in the future what they think things will happen. So
exactly.
It is ultimate total control, because it's almost like the Minority Report. They go, if the temperature rises and there's food shortages, blah, how will people react? Will there be a protest? Will there be marches? Do we clamp them down? It's insane. And you have to ask the question, how are they able to do so much computing? The amount of computing power that you would think would be necessary would make your brain boggle. And then you think, where's the climate change people getting excited about this? Because that amount of power needed causes so much warming. Those computers need to be cooled. They create heat. But Tim Manger was saying there is tech out there that is running this, which is so far beyond our comprehension that it isn't publicly known.
Yeah,
that's how they're able to do this. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. But
let me. I'll go back to a thought we had in our earlier conversation today. When we talk about infrastructure, that means like the roads, the fiber optic cable that gets laid in the ground, and the Wi-Fi towers that are been erected. Nobody pays attention to that stuff. But that's infrastructure for technocracy. They've been building this infrastructure for at least 5 decades at this point, and with all the modern tools that they have now, they're close to their end game. I think, just to pull all the wool off our eyes so we can see the whole thing. But all of this business of the IoT and also the Internet of Bodies, that type of concept. This has been slipped under the radar. Nobody pay attention to that. Except people like me I was writing about it that 10 years ago, and nobody said,
So
that doesn't mean anything,
so
forget it.
What is the Internet of Bodies? What do you think that means? Because I'm aware that there is this hyper, acceleration of sensors and wearables, and wear a smartphone and it measures your heart rate and your this and that. Put this continuous glucose monitoring device on you, and I'm aware that they want you to do this kind of stuff, and you just think, well, where's that information going and who's feeding it to where? And I don't want my data shared with any third party. It's very difficult to opt out of these things. But what do you mean by Internet of Body?
Well, I did a symposium last year in the fall called Omnivore. And you might know Dr. David Hughes from the UK.
Yep.
Maybe Dr. Dan Brody from
Australia. Yes, he literally just messaged me a few days ago. I need to get back in touch with him. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. He's one of my collaborators on this Omnivore project. We had also Dr. Lissa Johnson from Australia join us for this symposium. We talked fairly extensively about this concept of Internet of Bodies and how technology is being merged into the human condition that will enable eventually, and it will enable the two-way communication between your body and the Internet. This is scary stuff. It's, I don't say this lightly, but this is where the technology is going at this point.
And what will they be using this? How will this tech work? Will it be like a little chip inside you under your skin, a little tube thing, or what?
No, at this point, it's being done with nanobot type devices that are they're so small that they can swim in your bloodstream, and they're using it for medical purposes right now. For instance, to deliver drugs to certain organs of your body, or kill off cancer cells, or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
But
I don't believe that actually works. But anyway,
well, at this point, it's not working very well. I'll say that. But COVID gave them an opportunity to test this technology out just to see what would happen. Always, and well, you know this, how experiments work. Always the first go at something just fails. You know it's going to fail. You do it anyway, so you can find out what failed, right?
Yeah.
Well, they've collected a lot of information from the COVID era now that gives them more confidence to do what does work and not do the stuff that doesn't work.
Okay.
So we see the military has been a huge player in this whole thing. I don't expect personally that the big pharma companies they would not have pulled this off on their own without the military being involved. I put it that way.
Well, I think people like Sasha Latipova and Catherine Watts have talked about this has been a military operation.
Yes.
I think Sasha did some work with Deborah Lerman, and they showed that the timing, everything, this was all DOD. And I'm not saying this originated from the DOD. I think all our militaries and all our countries are corporations that are owned now by the globalists. I'm going to say something quite controversial. I actually believe that we are currently under a one world government, and there is just the mirage, the charade that there are individual sovereign states. All the countries that are attacking each other and fighting, it's all just a joke. It's theater to keep us plebs distracted. And they haven't come out yet and said there's a one world government, because I think there would be complete uproar and they wouldn't be able to control us all. So they're playing it very slowly, but we are under a one world government already. And I think they manipulate the armies and the militaries because they're serving them, not the individual countries. So that's where I stand on this. With regards to the Internet of Things, I'm going to put my devil's hat on, right? I'm going to be like an advocate, and just go, look, just be neutral here for a second. You listen to Joe Rogan. It's funny. He keeps pushing this idea. Oh, it'll be great in the future. You'll just be able to see the internet in your head, and you'll be able to download any information. It will be so cool. It'll be awesome. And then I have to remember, I'm a sci-fi geek. I love sci-fi. I used to watch Star Trek as a kid and Star Wars. Then I read my sci-fi books. And now I think, was that all pre-predictive programming? Even the sci-fi books.
Yeah.
Even the sci-fi books,
Yes.
But because the sci-fi books that I read, they talked about how, you're downloading information into your eye optics and you can see the digital stuff overlay into your eye neural network and optic nerve, and you can see everything. And when I was reading as a kid, I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. Imagine that. Imagine having all this information. Isn't it great? Will it not? Are you just a Luddite, Patrick Wood? Are you just some old fart that needs to get with the times? I mean, the young kids today would love that. Forget a stupid phone that you can drop and crack. It'll all be in your head, and you'll be doing porn online in your head. You'll be sending messages to your friends, having jokes without even speaking out loud. You'll be downloading information and the encyclopedia. You'll be an expert. You'll know how to do a new skill just with the click of your fingers. Everything will be downloaded. You don't know how to fly a helicopter? Don't worry. I'm going to download the information into my brain. Right. I'm ready to fly a helicopter. Doesn't this all sound wonderful?
Oh, it sounds wonderful. It really does. The problem is, of course, there's the one-way street that you explain here is based on your choices to download whatever you want, right? But that's not the way that it will work out in the end when they decide they want to download stuff in your brain that you don't want. And that's probably going to, just put the kibosh on the whole idea that, well, it's going to benefit you. No, it'll benefit them eventually when they can put anything they want in your brain, including stuff that you think, how you think. In fact, we already know this science of social engineering that we talked about earlier. This is already flat in your face, where they talk about this openly, rewiring people's brains to think a certain way, not to put words in their mouth to force them to say something, but rather changing the way their mind works so that they come up with the conclusions that they want them to come up with.
Yeah, thinking that it's their own ideas.
Yes.
How dangerous is that?
I know, scary stuff.
So why do they? If they've mastered it already, why do they need this tech? They're doing it already.
They're driven. These people, the technocrats and the transhumans, are totally driven with they have a passion. They have a lust for the drill down into everything and collect all the data they can. They're like a cat that gets a hold of a catnip toy and they just can't let go of it.
And so, am I right that these people won't actually inject themselves with this stuff?
I wouldn't bet it. I wouldn't say that. Yeah, exactly. If I were them, I wouldn't do it. But if they do, we should see some evidence of some of them falling over dead. I haven't seen a lot of technocrats fall over dead recently. I've seen a lot of other people fall out over dead. I'm sure you have too. With people like newscasters or whatever, they topple over on stage in the middle of a.
Do you not think what's going to bring them down is their hubris and arrogance? That they think they understand the body and they're so scientific and they're so advanced. And look, but they're like children. And what I mean by that is, that Gunning-Druger effect, where a little bit of knowledge and you just think you know everything. You just think, but it's the height of ignorance. And then the more you kind of learn, the more demoralized you get. You go, oh shit, I actually know nothing. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to fathom all of this information. And then with time, you get more information, you realize it's a continual journey. You'll never know everything, but it's fine. Is it not the case that these technocrats are just right at the beginning? Like they've got a little bit of information. They've got the science of membranes and polarization and gates and nanotech, but they're like kids. They think the human body in a very simplistic manner, which they think they've cracked, when actually it's a lot more complicated. And maybe their plans will never come to fruition. They're just doomed to failure. Do you think that's possible?
It's possible. the problem, I've studied the technocrat mind on purpose for decades now. Well, at least I studied the Trilateral Commission mind before that, but I've studied the technocrat mind especially, going back to the 1930s and going forward with the people at like M. King Hubbard and Howard Scott. You know, what made them tick in the first place? I find a stereotype that has continued through the ages. Today, these technocrats look a lot like like they did in the 1930s in the first place. You see a lot of personality. You see a lot of narcissism, pathological disorders. There's no empathy. These people have a real hard time expressing empathy over anything in society. And basically, in their head, everybody's an emotional animal to some extent, for sure. But in these people's head, they don't care a whit what you think. Period. They don't care at all what you think. It's all about what they think, and they think they have the science on their side. That's what made COVID so deadly to so many people. This attitude that they had the science that they said was right. They were cracked. It wasn't right. But nevertheless, that's what they stood at. They made that the hill that they were going to die on. Unfortunately, everybody else did the dying, not them. But you get my point.
100%.
These people have no empathy for the human race whatsoever. That makes it really difficult to get to them because they don't care. They don't care if a mob is racing for them with pitchforks and torches. They don't care. They just wipe them out.
Right. Before we talk about some of the other stuff, who around Trump is a technocrat?
About everybody at this point. Okay, well, we know Elon Musk. We know Peter Thiel, for sure. David Sachs, the AI czar and the crypto czar. Mark Andreessen, for instance. Jeff Bezos is jumping on the Trump train. That's the head of Amazon. Mark Zuckerberg is also on board. And a host of other technocrats from Silicon Valley. It's just interesting how people could change allegiances so fast. These people were all presenting as left-wing nutcakes, even 4 years ago. Just off the wall, leftist, whatever, nutcakes. All of a sudden, they've all flip-flopped like a fish in the pond, coming out of the pond. All of a sudden, they go, oh, we're going to go for Trump now because Trump's going to make America great. And we can see our way clear to use this sucker to further our agenda. And like I said, this is the first time that this technocrat class of people, actors, this is the first time that they've risen to the surface, I believe, in public positions.
Yeah.
The Secretary of the Treasury right now, Besant, is it Tim or Jeff? I can't remember his name, but his last name is Besant. This is the guy who worked for George Soros in the 90s when George Soros crashed the British pound. And he was on that team that did that.
Wow.
And that's where George Soros made his first $1 billion was manipulating the currency of England, for Pete's sake. Nobody's ever done that before, but he did it. And so we have this ex-employee of George Soros running our treasury. How's it going to work out for us?
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know if you know, buddy, but listen, Mark Zuckerberg had a haircut and now does jiu-jitsu. and is a reformed character. You know, people can change. People can change. And he's also apologized for the censorship, which was not his fault. It was Biden's fault. Big bad Biden. Big bad Biden, right? It was his fault. So he's not going to do any more censorship. Now he's a cool dude with a new haircut and he does jiu-jitsu. So it's all good. Don't worry about it. But listen, I've got this feeling that all of these billionaires, right, these tech billionaires, I don't buy into them being organic geniuses who've came up with. I really suspect that many of them have been seeded by the military-industrial complex, the security apparatus.
Yes, absolutely.
It's all security money, and these people are just frontmen. I don't know if you watched the movie Avengers, but there's like a Tony Stark character, you know, the industrial magnate, and he's charismatic, he's good looking, he's funny, he's a playboy, and while he's playing around with all the chicks, he happens to run this multinational global company at the same time, and he's smart, and he's making robots and everything. He's just incredible. And you think Elon Musk is like that. He's running 6 companies. He's the world's number one of this computer game, but he's doing Tesla, SpaceX. He's tweeting every 5 seconds. I mean, the guy is like the Tony Stark on steroids. And then you've got the Zuckerbergs and your Bezos and your Gates. I mean, the reality is these are all CIA, NSA, security front people, aren't they?
Let me give you a case in point in particular. Peter Thiel started the company Palantir. Yeah. In 2003, I want to say 2003, but in any case, he started it with a grant or an investment from a company, an investment company called In-Q-Tel. That's the slush fund investment vehicle for the CIA. It's legendary. They've been operating for so many years. That's how he got his start in the first place, by this injection of original capital from In-Q-Tel. Okay, then his first client, he only had one client for 6 years before he branched out. Okay, his only client was the CIA.
Wow.
This is on the books. This is not me saying that. This is on the historical record. Go to Wikipedia, you'll find it. So that's a case in point that this whole thing was set up with Peter Thiel by the CIA for the CIA, and he got all of his technology at their discretion to build the spy network that he's built, and now he's spreading it all over the world. The CIA doesn't have to do that. You see, the CIA doesn't need to get their hands dirty at this point by selling it to another country. Palantir is doing it for him. And so you have Peter Thiel at this point. Like I said, this guy's a snake, and you're absolutely right. He's a puppet. But also remember that he's on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group in Europe.
Wow.
Has been for several years.
Oh, wow.
This guy he's not the top player, but he's at least he's middle management. Okay.
He's middle management. That's it. Yeah, exactly. So even though they've got billions, it's not really theirs. They're just front men, and they're just highly paid middlemen working on behalf of the people who always remain nameless and faceless. Yeah. Am I right?
Yes, exactly right. I want to bring up another concept here, because this is important in my mind, that we see the major actors in the world are likely the central bank system of the world. Likely. There's been a lot of study recently with people like John Titus, for instance, and Catherine Austin Fitts. They've been studying this for a long time. And I tend to agree, because we studied the central bank systems back in the 70s and 80s, and I still, to this day, I always look to what they're doing. The central banks have been in lockstep together because of the BIS especially. But these apparently are the behind the scenes, never showing up on camera, almost never, don't know who they are. You can't identify them on the street. But these are the people that are setting monetary policy for the whole planet at this point.
Well, I agree, and I'll just come to that. So just in case people don't know, BIS stands for Bank of International Settlements,
Yes.
and they are the central bank for the central banks.
Yes.
And they were convened in the Netherlands, but they're based in Basel in Switzerland, and there's some peculiarities about that. So basically, they were set up just after, I think in the 1930s, after the Depression era, and then it got bigger and bigger. But the land that the BIS is on is not Swiss. It's extrajudicial, extra sovereign, extra national.
Sovereign, exactly.
Yeah, they have their own military force. They have their own special police military force.
Yes.
The Swiss and no other army or no other nation is allowed to enter the premises of the BIS without express permission. They are not audited. They are not. They cannot be sued by anyone, any body, any supranational body or the UN. No one can sue them. No one can investigate them. No one can hold them to account. They do not have to publish their records. It is as secret as you can get.
Yes.
And it is incredible that something like this exists on this planet, which no nation can question or hold to account this organization. And then on an individual level, all the central banks are like that. You cannot enter the central bank. You cannot audit the central bank. You cannot question the central bank. You cannot hold them to account. And then you realize this is where the power lies.
Exactly so. And I might add to your great description there about the BIS. Every employee of the BIS, from the receptionist to the head guy, right now it's Augustine Carstens, I think, from Mexico. But nevertheless, every employee, including all the couriers, the secretaries and the assistants, etc., they all travel with a diplomatic immunity. They call this without portfolio, where you can't touch them. If they have an official BIS pouch, you can't approach them, you can't arrest them, you can't look at it, seize it. And so anything they take in the world is secret, absolutely secret, even for personal messengers to take it. They won't commit anything, or at least some things will not ever be electronic email or something like that, but rather they still use paper and pencil to move material around the world. And like I said, these people travel without portfolio. It's like the king of, if the premier of Spain comes to America, to embassy here, you don't go into the embassy. You can't. That's not legal to do at this point. But they have a higher level of security and privilege and visibility more than the leaders of the world.
Wow,
it's incredible. You're absolutely right. These people are a den of snakes, in my opinion.
Den of snakes. Okay. Yeah. So next, what I want to ask you is, I've looked into things like in the UK, we've got the Fabian Society, and they had this symbol of a wolf wearing a sheep's clothing. I mean, they're right there in your face. And our ex-premier Tony Blair, was celebrating the memorial, some stained glass window at the London School of Economics, again set up by the Fabian Society. And on this window of the stained glass, you can see the wolf with the sheep's clothing. I mean, the Fabians are like the Marxists that do everything subversive, under the ground, undercover, slowly infiltrate and turn a country and the educational systems and the institutions, socialist. So, it's not a revolution like the Bolsheviks. It's a very subversive thing. And to be honest, I think they're more dangerous. Like, I think it's it's much better to see your enemy and know your enemy and face your enemy. I think
agree.
the enemy that pretends to be your friend and sides up to you and cozies up to you and then stabs you in your back, that's not the kind of person I want to be next to. I want to look the enemy in the eye and know that's my enemy. But the Fabians, I believe, are they are literally the sheep's. They're the wolves in sheep's clothing. And they've infiltrated, a lot of the institutions in the UK, a lot of the academic centres, all the Labour prime ministers, and a lot of the politicians are all Fabian. And I would suspect actually a lot of the Conservative members are also Fabian. There's been a lurch to the left.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say is there is a very large Marxist, socialist group of people in the world in positions of power and authority. Now, are they just being played by the ultimate puppet masters, the technocrats and the Fabians, and they'll get them to merge? Or is this a genuine clash between the technocrats and the Fabians? What's going on?
I think we're gonna see that clash take place at some point, because the Fabians have served their purpose, I think, like the communists have over the years, to deconstruct society. That's also a goal of the technocrats at this point, to deconstruct governments everywhere. And if the technocrats are actually the power structure that we need to be concerned with right now, you're going to see more of that that element being neutralized and thrown under the bus. Now, some of them probably will defect over to the technocrat side just because they want to survive. I can understand that. But I think we're going to see more of these people replaced and canceled in the end. Let me give you an example.
Okay, sorry. Yes, give me an example.
All of a sudden, in America, now that we have Trump, we have all the technocrats that surround him now. If we want to say Trump is a technocrat, okay, you can. You probably could. I'm not going to say that because it doesn't serve anything to do it. But nevertheless, Trump is now in power, and so we see him exhibiting traits of a technocrat. Put it that way. You see, all of a sudden, all of the nonsense about DEI is gone. All the nonsense about gender dysphoria, whatever, it's gone.
Yeah.
All the talk about Marxism and Marxists and socialism and whatever, it's all gone. All of it, just bam, it's not in the narrative anymore.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Well, those people like Black Lives Matter, for instance, they were useful to deconstruct society so that it would weaken our country, divide us beyond oblivion, and make way for the technocrat class to come in and do what they're doing now. So that's my considered opinion at this point. I think we're going to see, if the technocrats really have the power, we're going to see more Marxist and socialist and Fabians displaced, and their philosophy probably is going to get rained on, and it's going to go the way of the dodo bird. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, I 100% agree with you. I've said this, that Trump and the technocrats have come in, and basically it's a controlled demolition of the old control grid structure. It's outdated. It's not useful anymore. They don't want it, and they might as well get rid of it in a way that makes them look great. That satisfies. It's the ultimate bread and circus for the plebs. It's like, here,
exactly.
toss some bread to the cheering mob, and look how great we are. As if a few loaves of bread will satisfy, what the real hunger of society. And, so they're getting rid of DEI and trans and everything, because they never really believed in all that. They were laughing at us and everyone who was adopting it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, they probably were. They were like, what a joke these idiots
so
are.
How would you picture Klaus Schwab talking about the Great Reset now? He never said how the Great Reset is going to take place, but if you think about it just for a minute, reset means a complete makeover instantly, like that. You press the reset button on your computer, you expect it to respond immediately.
Yeah.
And so if Klaus Schwab had this idea that there was going to be a great reset at some point, like who's going to pull the trigger? Well, Trump has come out swinging against the old order, the deep state. He's swinging at these people left and right with executive orders and speeches, and we're going to take over the Greenland and Canada and whatever he's going to say.
Gulf of America.
And all of a sudden, you have a guy who's disrupting the status quo of the whole planet. And he has a plan at this point, fueled by technocrats in particular, to take over whatever is being reset, is being pushed out of the way at this point. If Trump is successful at demolishing the deep state, what's the new state going to look like? It's going to look like technocracy.
Did you see Elon Musk bounce onto the stage when Trump won? Did you see him when he came onto the stage?
Well, yes, I did.
He was almost like demonic. I mean, the man was possessed. I mean, he'd lost the plot. I mean, he was so ecstatic, and all the time I was just thinking, he was like, "We've done it." It wasn't he was celebrating for Trump. He was celebrating for himself and his masters. I think that's what he was happy about.
I think, yes.
You know, so what I want to ask you then is where does the Zionist Israel first business fit in? Because he's surrounded himself with war hawks and Zionist first people, and the whole of American Congress is really bizarre. You know, no other country in the world do you have like this dual loyalty, and people will be saying, "Oh, you're anti-Semitic." No, I'm not. I mean, look, let's just picture it. You know, everybody in Congress was like, Italy first and America first. You know, we stand by Italy. We love Italy just as much as we love America. Yeah, you'd be like, what the heck is going on there? Like, what's with all these Italian, Americans? Like, why can't they just say America first? What's happening there? People talk about the third temple and Trump being this Messiah and the Antichrist and God knows what. What is happening? Where does that fit into the technocratic world?
It's on one hand, I think this is all show for people. It's a sideshow.
Okay.
Sutton and I did a study back in the 1979 when we were challenged with the idea that, Israel has so many operatives in the Trilateral Commission, it must be a Zionist operation or whatever. We fought that tooth and nail along the way. We finally were challenged to do a study on all the membership. And I repeated this, by the way, a few years ago, just to see what happened. We took every member of the Trilateral Commission, including the Japanese and the European members or whatever, and the only way we could get them identified mostly was by surname, but we knew some were deceptive. They didn't have a surname like Stein or whatever, but we knew they're Jewish anyway. And what we discovered, there was no conspiracy at all that could be laid at the feet of this Zionist movement. And I stand in this, even to this day, when I kind of repeated that study a few years ago just to see what would happen, The movers and shakers are not necessarily aligned with Israel at all, but they tolerate them. And you have a lot of people, like a lot of lawyers and scientists, whatever. Certainly Israel has produced a share of leaders in that area for sure. But there's no a compelling reason for me to think a tiny little nation in the middle of nowhere, basically in the Mideast, is controlling the whole world. I just can't put that together. And our study bore that out in the first place, and I think it will today is the same thing.
So I've got a feeling that the real rulers have actually created Israel for their own purposes. And actually, they'll throw Israel under the bus as well, just like they have the Fabians and the Marxists and the DEI and the wokeism. Yeah. I think, I've said this on my podcast, they're just being used. And I think one of the reasons why we've seen all this brutality in Gaza is because the world is actually disgusted with Israel. And it's like, why would they let the world see this? And it's almost like they're priming them, for when they're going to bring Israel down, And I feel like the citizens of Israel have been brainwashed, trauma mind controlled into hating the Palestinians and living in a state of fear and trauma. But they're all being used by the ultimate evil people. That's my take on it.
I'll take you. This is my frame of mind that I come to any situation. I believe in the magician, a good magician who can pull off a trick. They'll distract you with something on this hand, and you never see what's going on behind the scenes, with the other hand, right? Yeah. A good magician can master that skill.
Yeah.
To make you think that you see something that you didn't see because they were just hiding the trick and you never saw it. I look at the world stage, all of the stuff that's been meaningful for me, at least in the last 15 years especially. The meaningful stuff has been sliding through while all these other distractions were being taken place on the other side of the aisle, right? Whatever it was, some distraction gets everybody's attention in the news cycle, and the media goes wild, and everybody's all of a sudden they're complaining about whatever it is going on. Black Lives Matter ruining buildings in Wisconsin or whatever, whole streets. While that's going on, it's a great show. But over here on this side, smart city construction goes on, and we see the genetic scientists are busy in their labs inventing all these other types of viruses that are going to kill us. And the important stuff was taking place over here.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Well, listen. Tell me, where does talk about public-private partnerships? We talk about Global Corp and the P3. Where does this fit in? And then if you can move on to then reflexive law and fintech and whatnot.
Simply speaking, private-public partnerships originated with the United Nations as part of sustainable development.
Right.
That's where they figured that they get the money to do what they wanted to do because they didn't have the money to do, to support sustainable development. So they invented this concept of public-private partnerships, and that suited the purpose. Now we have everybody in the world seems, in every community in America especially, everybody has public-private partnerships, and in the end of it, the cities and the states end up losing a bunch of stuff, while the private partner just walks away from the hubris, But there you go. It's sad, but it's kind of a form of fascism in a sense, where government is bonded against with private industry.
So the technocracy is an economic system.
Yes.
But it still needs a governance system. And is the governance system not still that blend of the corporations and the government of the countries, the people? The governments are ultimately politicians who are tax collectors, who are servants of the globalists. Mm-hmm. So they're just another layer of middlemen. But what I'm trying to say is, isn't that also true though? What we're seeing is this merger of governments with corporations, and we've basically got techno-fascism.
Yeah. At this point, it looks that way. Honestly, it does. I think in the end, we're going to see the technocrats are going to take over altogether and just morph it into a full-blown technocracy.
So does that mean there'll be no private corporations, no private? Everything will be owned by who? Who will own everything?
Well, that's a big question at this point. If Klaus Schwab has his way, you're not going to own anything at all, and whoever is going to have access to it is not going to be us, the people, not the nation states as well.
So I think this is where the stakeholder capitalism comes in, because if you look at WEF, it's meant to be a business forum with multinational globalist corporations, the BlackRocks, State Street Corporation, all these big companies that are all just monopolies. I think ultimately that's who's going to run. Technocracy is going to be run by these corporations. And what you will have is monopolies. You'll have one company that does food, one or two that does food, one or two that does energy, one or two that does transport, one or two that, and they're all ultimately owned by the same group of families and bad people.
Yes.
And, the government, there'll be no real government, it's corporations that will be running. It's like Blade Runner in the future, that corporation, whatever it was called, I can't remember. But, it will be corporations that run the world. And stakeholder capitalism is basically that. It's just communism. It's just, it's us, our public money, our taxation just going to feed them. So in the UK, Tony Blair really pushed public-private partnership in schools, prisons, but as hospitals as well. And even as a young doctor, I was calling out the nonsense to my colleagues, and they all thought I was an idiot. My senior consultants thought I was a conspiracy theorist. But I was saying to them, there's no point getting this £80 million hospital, because we're going to be paying debt repayment on this for the next 20 years. And we'll end up paying 200 million for the 80 million hospital, but it's not a mortgage, because at the end of the 20-year cycle, we will either have to pay the lump sum of the hospital or walk away. It's not a mortgage. It's like a rental. We're renting this hospital, and we have this massive interest bill to pay. And at the end of it, it's not our asset. It's not something we own. And everybody looked at me like, "Oh, you're just crazy." And honestly, I'm not kidding you. This is 20 years ago, right at the beginning of my career. I was looking at everything thinking, this is madness. And the budget of a hospital, like 5% of the budget, 10% of the budget is to repay the PPP from like 15, 20 years ago. And at the end of it, they still don't pay for it. And anything you want done, if you want your toilet seat fixed, you need to call them and get a contractor in. You don't have any real control over the asset. And we built so much infrastructure on that basis. And the thing is, if the company goes bust, or is the government bails them out, but if the company profits, they get to keep all the profits. So the loser is the government, the taxpayer, who pays out anyways, no matter what, and the corporation wins. If they lose money, they get paid by the government. If they make money, they keep the money. If you're a criminal enterprise, it's the ultimate win-win scenario. So all these PPPs for me were basically rackets, a way of funneling the taxpayer money to the corporations. And one of the things I've seen accelerate since the COVID pandemic is the destruction of small and medium-sized businesses and the proliferation of the multinationals. And it's like, what is that all about? It's the same agenda, isn't it? You want the big monopolies, and that's the one world government, playbook, isn't it?
Exactly. It is exactly so. Back in 1974, one original member of the Trilateral Commission, a scholar at the time, he wrote a paper for Foreign Affairs magazine. That's the CFR's magazine. And he wrote in that paper how the elite at the Trilateral Commission, for instance, that they were complaining that their so-called frontal approach in the past had not worked out very well for them. And they needed to have another approach to world domination that relied on a process that they called the end run around national sovereignty. We've seen this play out so many ways over the decades. An end run is more efficient for them than a frontal assault was, which was always it riled people up to the point they couldn't do it. And so they said, let's just back off and rethink this whole thing, how we're going to get all the resources of the world and get domination over the whole world. Well, they've done it. At this point, the end run has been completed. And along the way, you have all of these millions of public-private partnerships now that have set themselves up to suck government dry all over the world. That's what it does. It sucks them dry, and gets the resources that were previously owned by the people, like the water systems and the park systems and whatever it might be. There's only been a one-way flow of property going up the food chain, where it ends up in the hands of the mega corporations or the state streets or the Black Rocks or whatever. There've been blocks of cities, our city here in Mesa, Phoenix, where people lost their home, they wanted to sell, and all of a sudden cash offers come. These signs appear all over the city. We'll buy your house for cash. Okay, who has all the cash to do that? Well, they were just buying up the big players like State Street and BlackRock. They were just buying up whole neighborhoods. To turn them into rentals. They'll never be on the market again. They're not going to sell any of those properties to be used from other people. But we've seen this accumulation of resources all over the planet. People just, like deer caught in the headlights, they just don't see what's going on.
Exactly. If you look at Bill Gates buying all the farmland, if you look at
he has a new place out east of Phoenix here, or west of Phoenix. He's going to build like a 250,000 acre smart city in the desert. And he's basically saying it's going to be like a technocracy.
Oh, shit. Oh, for God's sake. And then if you look, I had a guest on, I haven't published the podcast yet. He talks about out in the States, in California, he has a business, and, he was approached by unknown people, lawyers who are representing unknown people, and they were saying, a venture fund or whatever, that they want to buy this business from him. And they offered him a lot of money. And he said, who are these people? And he said it was very, very suspicious. It was high up, and he just didn't understand why his, relatively successful business, but it's not huge, why he was being offered so much money for this. And he said, and it's not isolated. They are hoovering up these big venture capital companies, these big BlackRock, State Streets. They're hoovering up all the assets, all the resources, and then it will all be rental. We will be rented out. And if you look at David Webb, he's talked about the great taking, where even if you think you own your property or whatever, actually they will find some way, some legal loop, some taxation law, some inheritance tax. In the UK now, they're pushing the inheritance tax on the farmers who are sitting on asset-rich land but have very poor turnover. So they don't have the money. They have very poor liquidity and cash flow. So if they die, they can't pass this farm on to their son or daughter. They have to sell it. And who's going to buy it? Well, guess what? You had Larry Fink and Bill Gates visit Keir Starmer, within a few days of him becoming elected. So, and Bill Gates is probably going to buy the land, or BlackRock or whoever else, and then put solar panel farms. Or another thing as well is, if you control the food production, you control the people. That's massive. So, and the other example I want to give you is Ukraine. A lot of the assets, the land, the factories were owned by the country. You had the oligarchs, but now it's just been a wholesale fire. They've sold everything, all their assets, all the land rights, water rights, mining rights to American and multinational corporations. It's just crazy. It's crazy. So let's move on. What does reflexive law mean? What does that mean?
Wow. That's a hard concept to get across from people.
Okay. Try me.
But let me say this about reflexive law. It originated in Germany originally, and it took off as a legal system when sustainable development became established in 1992. The United Nations has since said that the theory of reflexive law is the only legal system that can support sustainable development. In other words, the rule law that we have in our country, the laws that you have in your country, the way the courts work, that will not work for sustainable development. They say, no, we have to have reflexive law. Now, I won't explain the nits and picks of it because it's too complicated, but let me just say this. Reflexive law means you get sued, let's say you're a farmer, and you get sued by an NGO that has a good something out for you, that you're doing something bad on your property, you're doing something bad, like maybe not protecting a certain species or something, and they sue you in court for being a bad farmer at that point. Okay, well, you have to defend yourself in court. So they bring other stakeholders to court to testify on your malfeasance for not showing concern and compassion for that species or whatever, and you're going to be punished based on all these people weighing in on your case. And you said, I didn't do anything in the first place. It's just a farmer, for Pete's sake. I didn't know that there was frog on my property. But that doesn't matter. Well, they'll drag you into court and they'll bring all these outside experts in to testify against you, and then they'll make the ruling against you based on their testimony, not on the rule of law.
Sorry, hold on. Are you talking about the General Medical Council and all the medical licensing boards around the world that are screwing doctors over like me and so many of my colleagues? Because it sounds like it.
You said it, not me.
No, I'm being serious.
I know. I'm being serious too. This is look. I've talked to so many lawyers over the last 15 years, asking them, "What do you know about reflexive law?" I get a blank stare. I haven't had one lawyer answer me, and I've talked to some good lawyers too, and they just don't. Well, they say, "Well, it's administrative law. That's what it is." No, it's not administrative law at all. This is a different type of legal system that we've never had on a planet before, where other people can be ad hoc called in to testify against you for something that you may or may not have done in the first place. And they say, well, he deserves punishment, and we're going to fine him or drive him out of business or whatever.
Lawfare.
Yeah. And so, this is a crazy legal system,
it's a kangaroo court.
Slipped in.
It's a kangaroo court. So basically,
Exactly.
Reflexive law and communitarian law are related but distinct concepts in legal theory. While they share similarities, they differ in focus, application, and theoretical foundations. Reflexive law is a self-regulating legal framework where law does not impose direct rules, but guides social systems to regulate themselves. It is associated with systems theory, particularly the work of Gunther Tübner, and is used to address complex, evolving societal issues that traditional legal frameworks struggle to manage. Rather than strict commands, reflexive law promotes mechanisms for self-regulation, such as industry standards, corporate social responsibility, and codes of ethics. Example, environmental regulations that require corporations to adopt sustainability policies without dictating specific methods of compliance. So basically, reflexive law is complete BS, because there's no strict rules. There's no right or wrong. It's all about, there is no right or wrong. There's no justice. Right. It's about opinions and what's flavor of the month and what is the group think at the time and what is the herd mentality doing. And what
you're
is
not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer, are you? If you were a lawyer, you would not get this. I guarantee it. But you got the gist of it right here.
Yeah. So basically, it's just mob mentality, and it's like, well, we don't like this today. I'm going to get a bunch of friends to say this is all wrong, and we're going to screw you over. And there's nothing you can find in any procedure or law because nothing's written down, and that's the whole point. The point is that our body of opinion and experts think that you're wrong. So screw you. Yes. I mean, it's just mob rule. It's mob rule dressed up as law. Anyway, the next one is communitarian law, and that is basically, it emphasizes the role of communities and shared values in, legal norms, and it contrasts with individualistic legal traditions, the rights of me, my inalienable rights. And it prioritizes common good and collective decision making. And, it's basically saying, oh, you know what? Yes, your individual rights are important, but actually, you know what? You've got a bit of social responsibility being part of this community. You have a social contract. And if you're going to be part of this community, you know what? Some of your rights are forfeit for the greater good. So I think what happens is, I think reflexive law is more towards corporations and bodies like that and businesses, and communitarian laws targets the individual. But basically both are very similar and are designed to screw us over.
Exactly. That's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line. God, these bastards. I mean, you have to give it to them. They're so smart, aren't they? They get you all into a pretzel with word salads and contracts and legalese and gobbledygook, and you just want to sit there and go, no, that's bullshit. But they'll just come back at you with pages and pages of subgroup section 2FA, blah, blah, blah. It's just all nonsense. All right, let's move on to cashless society and cryptocurrency, and then we'll come to a close. So where does that come into technocracy?
Well, we know that technocrats always hated cash. Always. They wanted to do away with cash and the price-based economic system in the 1930s.
Really?
They wanted to strip every dollar bill out of society and replace it with the script, like I said, that represented an energy credit that you could buy goods and services to support yourself and your family, right? So they have always had it out for cashless society in that sense. We see this today, and it's been legendary in America, especially Europe too, I know, but in America, there's been a war on cash for several years now, at least probably 15 years.
Same here.
Yeah, we see it. They want to drive it out of existence. The problem is, of course, people won't let it happen at this point. But the cryptocurrency market at this point has been fitted into the technocrat toolkit, if you will, as a way to finally drive currency out of the system, because privacy or currency represents privacy for the individual buyer or the seller of goods and services. And if they can replace cash with a digital currency that can be tracked from start to finish, wherever it moves, it can be tracked, and all of your habits, all your buying habits, all that stuff can be monitored and put through AI, et cetera, et cetera. In China, for instance, they have a programmable feature of their currency now that they can shut you off if they want to. They could shut you off with one flip of a switch in the central office, where your wallet simply just doesn't work anymore.
Wow.
The crazy stuff, but they're pioneering this concept in China. So digital currencies at this point are flooding in to the Trump administration, especially. That's why President Trump appointed David Sachs to be his crypto and AI czar. This guy was not vetted by Congress. He's just appointed. He's just an employee, special employee from the president. And so he's engineering the switchover now nationwide to cryptocurrencies. They're using the concept of stable coins, but they're pushing it down to the state level.
But they're not even stable. There's nothing stable about these stable coins.
No, not at all. It's vapor. It's vapor, but it can be controlled. That's my point. It is fiat in one sense, but it can be monitored and controlled down to the individual person.
Well, it's in the blockchain. They talk about it. Everything, every transaction is on the ledger. There is no privacy. So next time I go to the prostitute, people can track where I spent my Bitcoin and will know I went to see her. They will know I bought the AK-47 from, Mohammed. Yeah. They'll know that I bought my cocaine from Nigel. They will see that I had this, Bitcoin transfer. It's all on the ledger, and all the cryptocurrencies. I mean, the funny thing is there's nothing crypto really about them.
No.
It's all in the open. Everything's in the open. You can see every transaction. So there is no privacy, and it is trackable. And I feel that Bitcoin, which has got very, very strange background history, and all the other cryptos have been designed to slowly be introduced, and it's been done in a very clever way. They get the fringe people to do it, early adopters, the nut job weirdos, and then you get the cool crowd doing it, and then you get the people like Joe Rogan and Elon talking about it, and then the next thing you know, everybody's doing it, including your aunt Martha, and you're like, what? And then anyone who's not doing it is a bit of an idiot, and they know that if they impose it on everybody straight away, everybody rejects it. But if you do it like that, like the way I've just told you, everybody will adopt it. And it's just a way of getting people to accept digital currency, digital, basically trackable currency. But what do we do, Patrick? It's coming. It's here. It's now.
I know. This is serious business. When I wrote in my first book, Technocracy Rising, I said I wrote these engineers and technocrats and scientists, but they understand what it is to lay out a roadmap for their projects. They're masters of that. They write down the requirements that they need to meet and the plan to get there. To eventually erect the building. And at this point, their building is almost done completely. And I said at that time, there will be a time when they have amassed enough chips on the table, if you will, to call game over. And that will be the day that technocracy rises to the pinnacle.
What do you think?
I think we're at that point right now, honestly.
Do you think they'll just crash everything? Just bring everything down?
It looks really iffy at this point. Yes, that could be.
And the thing is, you use huge crises to enact change. Crises are opportunities for these psychopaths.
Yes.
And if you look at the First World War, they use that and there's always multiple opportunities, multiple things that they benefit. The Second World War, the Bretton Woods financial system came into play, and lots of other things. They always have something they benefit from. So the COVID pandemic, they got their digital QR codes. They were able to do social experiments and nudge us and monitor how we behave. They were able to test their mRNA tech. They were able to maybe depopulate some of us. And they were able to then prepare the ground for the destruction of trust within the medical system, the government, the political class, the media. There's always multiple benefits. At the time, there's a benefit. Later on, there's a benefit. There's a fall guy. There are multiple contingencies. They're smart mother frackers. You have to give it to them. Anyway, so moving forwards, I feel like they're going to use some opportunity, and the opportunity would be like, oh, there's another war, and oh my goodness, we cannot have another third world war. Look how devastating it was. You know what? How can we stop war between countries? Well, if there are no more countries and there's just the one country, well, there's not going to be any more wars, are there? Because we're all just one people. So that's an argument you might have. Or, there's so much death and horrible, misery and horrible governments doing democide on their people. Then there's an uprising, and you know what? You overthrow the government, you get rid of the politicians, and then you get the technocrats to come in. Just people who want to do the best thing and take care of us, and driven by AI. It doesn't have feelings and isn't corruptible and won't sleep with little children and won't take cocaine. Won't drink the blood of babies and take adrenochrome injections. They'll basically break the system and then present the solution, because that's problem reaction.
This is happening. This could happen in America right now with the incursion of AI into our government. For instance, with this Doge committee, they're scraping out all of this corruption that existed for decades, I'm sure, and we're all happy to see it exposed. But when they're done analyzing every segment of our government, they're going to basically conclude, guys, this has never worked, and it's not going to work now, and there's no hope of ever restoring it. We need to make some serious changes here to the way things are done. We need to have AI take over all the operation of government, keep it honest and transparent. I can see that happening.
And you know what? But they won't disclose everything. They won't disclose the hidden hand of the evil people and the CIA and the seeding and the figures behind, Elon and Bezos. And they will show you what they want to show you. It'll be the controlled demolition of the old control grid system. But
controlled demolition is what you're looking at. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Now, another bit of predictive programming, which is really quite sad because I really like this movie. Yeah, I like Matt Damon. Have you ever seen this film called Elysium?
Yes, I have.
So basically, for those who don't know, the world's ruling class elite live on this massive space wheel up in the sky. Absolute beautiful Garden of Eden, run by technocrats and bureaucrats for the ruling elite class. And don't get me wrong, I mean, not everyone is an elite class living in this massive mansion. There are literally engineers and scientists working up there, but they're the privileged lot. And down on the planet Earth, robots rule. You go when you go down to your local government office, it's a computer you're talking to, literally. Everyone is poor. No one has food or water, and they're the dregs of society. And these corporations control everything. That's where we're kind of heading, isn't it?
Yeah. Pretty sad. Remember the book Brave New World?
Yes.
That was a Brit. one of the brothers, if you will, Aldous Huxley wrote that book, looking into technocracy. And you might remember that there was no political structure in Brave New World. It was basically a technocracy run by the alpha pluses, that they'd make all the decisions for everybody in the society. And there was no political discussion whatsoever. If something was decided for you, that's it. There was no decision. If you didn't like it, they give you a pill called Soma, and you could take a pill and you chill out real quick. This is the concept of a scientific dictatorship in the end, where you'll be happy because you're taking drugs or whatever, but on the other hand, you make no decisions for your life at all, and you have to go with whatever they decide for you to do. Period.
All right, okay. Right, I think we've mapped out technocracy pretty well, haven't we? Between the two
really
of us. We've thrashed it out. We've thrashed it out. Now listen. We need to leave the listeners with some glimmer of hope, some tangible things that they can do to fight back and resist or do the best. I mean, part of me, one of the things I have with people who are uber religious, not just Christians, is that, there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to trust in the Lord and the Jesus Christ and everybody. And I'm like, nah, God wouldn't want us to do that. God would want us to fight tooth and nail And actually, I think Jesus would too. He was a proper rebel fighter. He wasn't sitting on his backside. He was fighting the Romans and the priestly class. He was a proper rebel fighter, right? So, like Jesus, we need to be fighting back against these evil bastards. We don't wait for God to just come and dish out justice. So what do we do? What do we do to resist this absolute insanity, which actually most of humanity has been suckered into doing for them,
Yes. I've said for years now that people need to be local, not worried about national so much as being local, activated in their own communities to root this stuff out, because it's come into every community in America, especially. And if you're not willing to go and get your hands on your city officials, maybe the mayor, maybe the council members, some board members or whatever, talk to these people for crying out loud and get them on your side. Educate them. They don't understand what's going on. But you can do a lot of good at this point to build a firewall around your city to make some of this stuff, to rule it out, not coming in. You can do the same thing in your county in America and also on the state level as well. Do you know your state legislators? Do you know them on a personal basis? If you ever shook a hand in anybody, these are the people that live in your community. And if you're not communicating with them, don't whine when you get the business. That's, it's obvious, but this whole in politics in this country especially, everybody wants to argue about national politics. Who could do anything about that? Nothing on a Washington D.C. It marches to its own drum. If you're not there, you're not going to have any influence at all. But you do have influence in your own community. You need to exercise that and get a seat at the table, if you will. Now is the time to do it. If there's never a time to do it in history, now is the time to do that, because this is going to run over us like a steamroller if we're not careful. How
many years do you think they've had in charge? 100, 150, 200, 250? How many years do you think?
The whole plan for a world government? It's been, we see it even the dollar bill, for instance. You mentioned that before, the New World Order. But the modern expression of globalization started in 1973. I really believe that. And they changed their game plan at that point.
I know, but can we go back in time a bit? The reason why I'm saying is there was a book written, let me just, booklet, a very small booklet. Let me just read it out. I'll find it. I don't want to get this wrong. But basically, The Fate of Empires by Sir John Glubb. You ever heard of it?
No.
It's only 26 pages. It's amazing. Fantastic. And it's a British guy who joined the army, went to the First World War, then went to the Middle East, served in the Jordanian army. And he just looked through history and felt there's so many lessons to be learned about history. And he talks about the consecutive empires. And so, for example, he goes, the Assyrian Empire, how many years in duration? 247. The Persian Empire, 208. The Greek Empire, 231. The Roman Republic, 233. The Roman Empire, 207 years. The Arab Empire, 246. The Mamluk Empire, 267. The Ottoman Empire, 250. The Spanish Empire, 250. The Romanov-Russian, 234. The British Empire, 250. And he goes, it's kind of like 10 generations that you'll have that empires normally last for. And he goes, one of the things that's really interesting is that these empires, they come out of nowhere, they suddenly take control, but then they're easily overthrown as well. And you never think about it. Like, for example, Macedonia, prior to Philip, was this insignificant state north of Greece. Persia was the great power of the time, completely dominated the area, right from Eastern Europe to India. But literally 36 years after Philip ascended, the Persian Empire was gone. And the Macedonian Empire extended from the Danube to India, including Egypt. And then he gives other examples, like around 600 AD, you had the Eastern Roman Empire, Egypt, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Turkey. Then you had the Persian Empire, Iraq and Persia, Afghanistan. And the Arabs in the Arab Peninsula were just this backwater nomadic people, literally, nothing. And within 30 years, they explode out of the Arabian Peninsula and defeat two superpower empires. And boom, gone. And you would never have thought about it. And, and he gives other examples. And so what I'm trying to say is, again, look, I mean, like Mongolia, Genghis Khan, I mean, nomadic tribes. And then and what I'm trying to say is, like, you never see them coming. And right now, the technocrats, they think they're in power and they're so smart and they're injecting these things in the Internet of Things and they're going to have transhumanist implants and God knows what. But in their hubris and arrogance, couldn't they be just at their peak of the hubris and at the precipice of their decline? And do you know what? You cannot cage the human spirit. There's only so long it works. And eventually, people will say, enough is enough. We're not going to play along with this anymore. And hopefully they'll fall. I mean, I don't know. What do you think of that?
I think so. Yeah. I personally, I can understand that philosophy because I've been this way for a long time, I'm sure. But if people will put up with this, they're going to get what they deserve.
Yes.
But more people are waking up now to the threat. I've said for a long time that the threat that's facing us is not communism, it's not socialism, it's not fascism, it's technocracy. This is the one that's going to kill us in the end. If we don't stop it, it's going to be existential for the whole world. We've never had a threat like this before in history, not ever, where the whole world was affected. Germany tried to get a foothold on the whole world, but they didn't get out of Europe, basically. Good thing. Some of the Arabs tried to get out, but they didn't. They failed. Even England probably did as much with the colonies, but never that wasn't conquering necessarily. But there's never been a global threat like this. For instance, how could the population of the world be vaccinated? 72% plus of people in the whole world got at least one shot. How'd that happen? The whole world. People think about that. How could that be? Well, somebody was pulling the strings up the top of the food chain, and it wasn't the United States, it wasn't Germany, it certainly wasn't the UK. It wasn't the central banks either necessarily, but somebody pulled the strings. And they're also pulling the strings right now with this technocratic flip over of the whole planet. At this point, we need to join hands, if you will, or arms up across all continents on this planet and fight these people with everything we have at this point. Saying, no, we're not going to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is they constantly use divide and rule,
Yes.
Get us all fighting against each other. The clash of civilizations, the Judeo-Christians against the Muslims, the blacks against the whites, the youngs against the olds, the women against the men. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yep.
And I've got a saying. I say, I'm on Team Humanity. I'm on Team Humanity. If I have a go at anybody, whether it's Zionists or Democrats or Republicans or conservatives or whoever, or the trans agenda people, it's not. I'm against the divide and rule and what they're trying to achieve because they're not on Team Humanity. I'm on Team Humanity. And we all need to understand our shared humanity. It doesn't matter where we are. Yes, there's local cultural differences in food, and tastes and religions. But, ultimately, everyone's pretty much the same. You know, you go to any household table at dinner time, anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
You know what? They all want the same thing. They want to be
Exactly.
loved, to love their children, to see their children grow up safe and secure. Men want to have lots of sex. Women, they want a nice, decent husband who's not an alcoholic, not a wife beater. You know, everybody wants a job that they feel purpose with. They want to love nature. They want to be kind to each other. They don't want to be cruel to other people. Very few people are like that. Those are the psychopathic narcissists. Most people, just good human beings. Good human beings.
Yeah.
Right, listen,
Absolutely.
Patrick, it's been great chatting to you. Oh, I've got my final question of the day. It's my signature question. And that's, my friend, imagine you're on your deathbed. It could be 20 years from now, could be next week, and you're about to meet your maker. But you're comfortable. You've got all your loved ones surrounding you. Before you pass on and meet your maker, what words of wisdom and advice would you pass on to your loved ones?
Number one, don't give up.
Great. Is there a number two?
because I'm out of there at that point. I understand where I'm going to go out of this life, but they're going to remain. They can't afford to give up hope, first in their faith, then also in their ability to survive. And that's probably the best thing I can give to my kids, who are all not necessarily on the same page as I am at this point. But nevertheless, I would tell them, don't give up and don't give in.
Amen to that. Wouldn't you also say that never underestimate the ability for one person to make profound change?
Absolutely. 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 I believe that. Totally.
I mean, we all have it within us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what the technocrats fear, which is
Yes,
why
they
they put so much control and all this energy into caging us and controlling us, because they are terrified of our true potential. And the reason why I go on about health and why I'm writing a book about my Doc Malik Simple Guide to Good Health is because I think the fittest, healthiest, mentally, physically version of yourself, the most resilient form of yourself, is the truest form of freedom, expression of freedom. And that's why we all need to be fit, healthy, and tough. Because you know what? That's the hardest kind of person to control. But someone who's unhealthy, overweight, depressed, anxious, vulnerable, broken, well, you're just putty in their hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Patrick. God bless you, and thank you so much. I hope to speak to you again soon.
My pleasure. I hope we can do it. I hope we could do it again.
Yeah.
And I'll take care of America. You take care of the UK.
I'm on it. Can I ask a side note very quickly?
Sure.
Sometimes I go on social media and I tell people, look, stay vigilant. Don't put your faith and hope in Trump, right? He's not your savior. And
Really?
And people get really upset. And there's like a lot of people get upset. Oh, you're blackpilling, you're doom and gloom, and give that guy a chance for God's sakes. He's one of us. Look at all the good stuff he's doing. I'm not going to tell you what I say. What would you say to these people?
Reality has a way of evening out the table. And whatever they want to believe, they're not going to be persuaded by me for sure. But I tell people, we'll see, won't we? We'll see. And when if I could plant that doubt in their mind, they'll always be looking at, well, I'll see. Well, when they finally figure out what's happening, they're going to turn against him like he's never seen people turn on anybody in the history of this country. But that's my opinion. I think in the end of it, the technocrats, even if Trump is not a technocrat, these technocrats he's appointed are the ones that are going to kill us and take us down as a nation. So we need to focus on who the enemy here is. It's not actually Trump per se. But these technocrats, they're really flat out off the wall, in my opinion. These are the devils that are going to take us down as a country and as a people.
All right, buddy. Thank you. I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.